Now I promised you a video, and the video is about the effects of the collapse. And although I can't speak for the rest of the world, I can speak for the UK, and I think something pretty similar would actually happen in other westernised countries. Now I have an acquaintance, I won't call him a friend, who is involved in the margins of this plan. He knows a reasonable amount about it. And this is basically based on what he told me, and it includes a little piece of information taken from a newspaper article of the time. So people say, well, what did the UK government have planned for 2008? Because it is quite a little reported fact that the UK government was within 24 hours of starting to implement this plan at one point. And the answer is rationing. And people say, oh, don't be stupid. How could the government ration everything? How could they ration food and petrol and everything else? Because you'd need ration books, and surely they can't have already millions and millions of ration books printed, and so on and so forth. And then somebody suggests smart cards, and of course the same thing applies with smart cards. You'd have to have them ready to go. It's not the sort of thing you can just turn on like that. Well, it turns out there is something you can just turn off like that, and that thing is electricity. And in a modern Western society, by using electricity, you can actually ration almost everything. Now you think about it for a minute. If there's no electricity, what stops working? Well, in the UK, certainly the water system stops working. So you've rationed fresh water. The petrol pumps, obviously, and the actual pumps that pump petrol into the tankers, they stop working. So you've rationed fuel, not just petrol and diesel, but also fuel oil that's used for heating. Another thing people don't think about is that you've also rationed gas. Because the gas system contains a lot of electrical monitoring equipment, there are fail-safe lines in the valves in the gas system where if you remove electricity, the valve closes and shuts off the gas. And this is true in your home because your boiler won't work without electricity. And it's much more true for the supply side of it, the big pipes, the gas storage facilities, they all go offline if there's no electricity. But, even more sneakily, every modern shop requires two things to operate, and they're both dependent on electricity. They require an electronic till and a credit card reader. So, by rationing electricity, you also ration food. Now, your little corner store, owned and operated by some enterprising businessman, probably would not worry too much about this and would probably happily take £200 for a can of baked beans. However, the big supermarket chains, they're simply not set up to operate cash, and they would never do so. So, how would that work? Well, obviously, you've only got 3 or 4 hours in the day, or however much electricity they allow you, to do all your shopping, go get your petrol, do everything else. And everyone's trying to do it at the same time. So it would cause a bit of chaos, it would cause some social disruption, but it would definitely ration everything. Now, the UK government had a collapsing series of plans, and as things got worse and worse and worse, they would take the amount of electricity per day down from, say, 4 hours down to 1. Now, why 1 hour? Well, it turns out that water systems, if you leave them to stagnate for an hour, especially high pressure water systems like London's is, the gas starts to come out of the water. It might seem a bit strange, gas in water, but any time water is under pressure, there is gas in that water. I'm not talking about town gas, I'm talking about normal air. And due to leaks and other things, the pressure reduces over that hour, the gas comes out of the water, and suddenly you've got airlocks everywhere and the whole system breaks down. So the minimum amount of electricity the UK government were willing to go down to was 1 hour. Could be different elsewhere. And in addition to that, the government was also planning to stop people from moving around the country, just like the good old Soviet Russian days. Now, stopping electricity kind of does that a bit anyway, because all the trains in the UK are electric. But they were planning to actually put the army on various main roads around the country to stop people from using them, unless of course you had official permission or you were on some critical mission of mercy like the ambulances. And talking of emergency services, a study was done on what the likely effective lifetime of the emergency services in a crisis like this would be. Because the thing is that all these people, these nurses, these doctors, these firemen, these policemen, they all have families. And in a crisis, where do you want to be? Out sorting someone else's problems out, or sorting your family's problems out? And they reckoned that after 2 to 3 weeks, you could pretty much forget about the emergency services, which could be a bit of a shocker for some people. So, your neighbour sets light to your house, there are no firemen. All the firemen are at home sorting out their own problems. Now, this may seem to be painting a bit of a black picture, but it is blacker than you think. And the reason for that is that in the 2008 crisis, which, let's face it, it was really bad, it was worldwide, but it was nowhere near as bad as this one is going to be, as I'll come to in a moment. More than 5 million people died. A lot of them were suicides. And the reason behind that was they'd lost their pension funds, in some cases they'd lost their life savings. In some countries the price of property plunged so that they owed the bank about 4 or 5 times what their house was actually worth. And these sort of pressures do lead people who are prone to commit suicide to commit suicide. Now, I'm lucky. I am not at all prone to commit suicide. If I was, I would have. Because I'm one of those people who lost nearly all of my pension fund. It's worth 1/120th of what it was, so I can no longer afford to retire, and I have to make these YouTube videos and sell paintings and do everything else until I die. That is the future for me. I'm not retirement age yet, but I'm saving as hard as I can so that I've got a little bit of a buffer for when I reach that in 10 years' time. So you think about it, not a bad crisis, and as many people died as Jews were gassed in World War II by Hitler. And you don't see that anywhere. Mainstream media won't report any of that, but it's there. If you know where to look, you can go on the net, you can find these figures. Some people reckon it's as high as 6.5 million, and there were some direct deaths as well as a result of services being cut in some countries. People who needed urgent medical attention, for example, didn't get it. So that's a look at the likely outcomes of the next crisis. Now, how long will it last? I don't know. But what I do know is that one of John Major's senior Treasury advisors, Gordon Brown's senior Treasury advisors from the 2008 crisis, took to Twitter just recently and said that this crisis is going to be 20 times worse. And he also advised every UK citizen to stockpile bottled water and canned goods as a minimum 2 weeks' worth. As a minimum 2 weeks' worth. And he forgot something, and it's the thing that all beginner preppers seem to forget, and that's medication. If you're diabetic or you need to take medications for other reasons, make sure you've got 2 weeks' worth of that as well, won't you? Anyway, I hope you've found this video informative, and if you have, please like, share, subscribe, and send me any comments you feel like sharing. Thank you very much.
Harmonic, ionic, bionic, atomic. It will astonish you. It's magical and casual, actual but classical, practical and factual. Arduinotronic, harmonic, ionic, bionic, atomic. It will astonish you. It's magical